Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, the college admissions double standard by Brennan Barnard of Forbes. Our questions from a listener is, question 1, how do I know what I can do on a college visit? That's Will from Wisconsin. And question number 2 is, do income or financial need play a role in merit scholarships? That comes to us from Mary Claire of Illinois. Our interview is demystifying how waitlists work at a place like UCLA and why do we have to waitlist so many students. That is by Gary Clark, the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at UCLA. That's part 1 of 2. And our college spotlight comes to you from Missouri. That's the University of Missouri, part 1 of 2. Or should I say Missouri? I'm never quite sure.
I think it depends how southern you are. The more southern you are, the more it changes how it comes out.
That's right. I'm from Chicago, so it's like Missouri. It's flip a coin.
There you go. So let me start out by, I want to shout you out, Dave. I was actually texting a client of mine who listens regularly, never misses an episode, and I was like, this is literally 15 minutes ago. And I said, I need to go. We're about to record 2:09 with Dave. They said, you're recording this early? They said, that guy is dedicated. And then I said, most of the time he's coming off the graveyard shift as well. So that's total. I said, he's just coming from either helping somebody with COVID or taking a bullet out of a gangbanger. And then I got this response. That is crazy. How can you speak so intelligently after a night shift?
It's called single malt scotch.
So I give you a hard time, but I mean, think about it. You joined us on episode 105, which was the start of year 3. We're now into more than 100 episodes. You missed one episode in that time, which is 2 years. And that includes having your father pass in there. So I give you a hard time. You're my brother from another mother, but you do deserve some shout out for dedication. And as much as it's grudgingly difficult for my ego, because we compete since we were like 3 with each other, coming off halfway intelligent. Got to give you your props, dude.
Well, who else is going to keep you informed on who is Doogie Howser?
Oh, my goodness. You know, the thing with Doogie Howser, this is what bothers me. When I was going down, I was thinking, Lisa's got my back. She reads all the time. You know, she's going to come to my rescue. And then she sends me this text message with the YouTube link. Like, she never sends me YouTube links. So I click it, and she's trying to introduce me to a Doogie Howser episode. Like, get clued in, dude. So I struck out with that one. But in fairness, this is something I've never shared publicly. I'll share it now. I guess that listener was right when they said, were you under a rock in the 90s? Because I went through, I don't think I told you this, Dave, but I went through this phase in the 90s where I said, I'm watching too much TV. We're getting rid of our TV. That will make me read more. So we didn't have a TV for years. So that probably partially explains it. But I still know who the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is. Do I get credit for that?
You do? Well, you better. That's Will Smith, man.
Yeah, I lived in Philly.
You better know Will Smith. It's okay. You know, I realized that I had never seen an episode of Full House, though I had seen Bob Saget as a stand-up comic. And, I mean, he's quite a raunchy stand-up comic, so I never could reconcile his role as this, like, wholesome dad of the Olsen twins. So I decided I'd just keep my image of him as a raunchy stand-up comic because that's what I know.
Well, don't ask me about them because you won't like the answer. But let's go on to another topic. So another announcement. So, first of all, we're so appreciative for everybody sending in college spotlights for us to feature. I will say we have a pretty big list of ones that you've sent in, enough probably to take us all the way through the end of 2022, to be honest, when you consider the fact that, when I interview a guest, they're going to do their own spotlight for their own college. But I got to thinking, and one thing I never asked when people emailed in about the spotlights, and that is whether their child is a senior or a junior or sophomore. And so this is my request. If you send in a spotlight and your child is a senior, please just send another message at questions at your college by kids. Said, hey, I sent in a request for a spotlight and my child's a senior, because I'm going to prioritize those, because you got to make a decision by May 1st. And so if you're a senior, we're going to push those up to the top of the list. So that's a request. Secondly, next week, you got to come back because I got a big announcement. I'm going to tease it out and just leave it at that. I'm not going to say anything else. It's just a big announcement next week. So you want to make sure that you don't miss episode 210. Surprise. I like surprises.
All righty.
My last announcement, I do want to make a little bit of a correction to our conversation last week, Dave. Went back and listened to it when it came out. You know how we talked about colleges marketing and all the things that they're doing to attract students. And I just wanted to bring up one other side, and that I didn't think I brought out in that conversation, and that is, I don't want to say that you could never cross a line and be too excessive. I mean, I'm a little troubled by some of what I see happening right now in football recruiting. There's like an all-out war to see who can build almost like the most palatial dressing rooms for the players. Like at the rate we're going, you're going to have gold-plated $500,000 showers with big screen TVs and consoles and every imaginable feature to try to get the latest football player to your school. There's reports that Texas A&M has spent $30 million with this new NIL. And they made mention likeness. And I don't know if you know this, Dave, but they have the number one recruiting class based on the recruiting services in the history of recruiting services.
Wow.
Tapping in, now, mind you, a lot of that's oil money from donors and boosters. So that's not necessarily coming from the school's budget. So it is a little bit of apples and oranges. But I know we made the point that you need to spend money to make money, and you need to be creative, and nonprofits still need to function as businesses. But I also do think that that does not mean that absolutely anything goes. And there is a point where you can be too excessive. So I just wanted to just throw that little slight corrective into that conversation. Okay, so Dave, I'm going to flip it a little bit today and slightly flip the order. And I'm actually going to start out with my admissions vernacular. The reason for that is my admissions tip relates to the admissions vernacular. So I'm just going to flip it, and it'll make sense, when we get into it. So the word for the day is demonstrated disinterest. What's demonstrated disinterest?
You're asking me? Demonstrated
yeah.
disinterest?
Who else am I going to ask? You think I'm asking Anika Madden?
No.
Your brother
disinterest.
Michael or Andrew? Norm?
That's right. Well, maybe that's when you just show so much disrespect. It is clear you do not have any intention of attending this college. So, like, maybe forgetting to come to an interview, not filling out all of your application, maybe not recognizing that there's an S on the name of the university you're applying to.
The University of Baltimore?
Yes. That ain't nobody I know ever named their baby Johns except for this one guy in Baltimore.
So bingo, winner, chicken dinner. So I was on a presentation with 8 VP of enrollments and admissions deans this week, and of course with a bunch of college counselors. And somebody asked a question: how much do you guys track interest, demonstrated interest? I was really pleased because that question comes up a lot, and normally you get a very politically correct answer, and I get it. As soon as the school says that they track a lot of demonstrated interest, one, your admission officers get stalked. Two, people try to basically game the system. In other words, figure out how you're tracking and then just emulate those behaviors, and then they defeat their purposes. So you normally get a very, PC answer. Plus, different schools do it differently, and then people define the word differently. And in fairness, both the Clarks, Gary Clark at UCLA and Rick Clark at Georgia Tech, are at public schools, and most public schools traditionally don't factor DI into their assessment at all. So they would be the first ones to tell you, we don't look at interest at all. In fact, Rick Clark has a great line about demonstrated interest. He says, you want to know how we track demonstrated interest? Did you apply or did you not apply? It becomes just this muck. And you get this, just a bunch of twaddle, really, is what you get. But I want to give a shout out, actually, Sarah Lawrence, Director of Admission. He answered that question better than I've ever seen somebody answer it in one of those forums. So much so to the point that I actually might reach out to him and see if he'd be willing to be that transparent on a podcast in front of the broader audience. But then he went on to say something. He said, you know what we really noticed? Demonstrated disinterest. And I'll be honest, it was the first time I'd heard that term. I mean, I immediately knew what it was, but you nailed it. So and everybody, all 8 people basically yeah, we noticed that. Like everybody agreed with him, right? So what is it? Well, you gave some things. It could be a school shows up to your school to do a presentation, and you're a no-show. It could be you're a no-show on your interview, or you don't sign up for interviews when they're clearly sending messages out. Sign up for interviews, in some cases even saying we use interviews to track interest, and you don't sign up. It could be not opening emails. It could be not attending any virtual visits. It could be how you conduct yourself on a visit. You're all slouched over. You're on your phone all the time. Fall asleep, Or here's one schools don't like. Don't wear the competitor's T-shirt,
Right,
sit in the front row, Not the best idea to show up at Auburn with an Alabama shirt. It could be things like just having terrible answers in the YSSA, indicating you know literally nothing about the school. In reality, if you really think about it, demonstrated disinterest is really the same thing as demonstrated interest. It's just pointing out the negative side of things. I think it's a little bit more palatable for schools to present it that way. But that's our word of the day, and you nailed it. And so I'll give you credit for it. And my tips, I just gave you them. My tips were don't do those things. Those are some of the things that you don't want to do. I cannot stress this enough. In this world that we're in, where college applications are going up at more competitive schools because of fear, and people are applying to more and more schools, schools are tracking you virtually in very sophisticated ways. I'm going to say more about that on 215 and more about that in YCBK Plus blog. All right. So, Dave, the big number.
Big number.
155. And our regular listeners know by now when my big number sounds low, I'm probably talking percentage, and you would be correct. Auburn has had a 155% increase in their applications since 2020. 155%. They're up 68.5% this year in the fall. That came out in a press release in mid-December. And they had almost a similar type of increase last year. So, Dave, what's your theory on that? How that would happen?
Well, they didn't win a national championship.
No, that can do it.
But then could they have gone test optional and increased their applications that way? Or they just decide that they were going to break out of the regional university rut and expand their applications nationally by some way?
So it's a confluence of things, because you don't go up 155% without all the stars being aligned.
Right.
So, and by the way, just this year alone, 76% increase in Alabama, 100% increase from diverse populations. That was all in their press release. That's just this year. And how has it increased the selectivity of the school? Well, their acceptance rate is now under 1 in 4 in the early action. Less than 1 in 4 got in. Average GPA 4.21 Average ACT 28.6. So obviously, with much more applications, they're shaping their student body. So how did this happen? Well, believe it or not, only 7% applied test optional.
Oh, wow.
But I still feel they benefited from test optional because they have two border states in Georgia and Florida who are requiring test scores. And I know sort of the commotion that created with certain people, and then they'll look to neighbor states. But they did create a test flexible policy, which could be very appealing. And this goes into some of what I talked about with Lisa of how I'm looking for schools to find creative ways of either getting test scores or in certain cases not getting them, but having it qualified versus just the extremes. So the way their test flexible policy works is if you have a 3.6 GPA and you just indicate you were unable to take the test, then they will review you test optional holistically. So if you have someone with a 3.6, they basically gave you the option of applying without test scores. Secondly, and listeners have heard me talk about this before, when you join the Common App, you're about to get a whole boatload of applications. So, UGA joined the Common App last year, and they were up 48% last year. So Auburn is just their second year joining the Common Application, and apps soared. They had 26,000 of their 40,000 apps came through the Common App, and they weren't even on there. It's only year 2.
That would make sense.
They also formed a special partnership with local dual enrollment schools in the area. And if you have 6 credits from Auburn-approved courses and you maintain a 3.0 in dual enrollment courses, then you would qualify for automatic admission. So if somebody went in and got 6 credits through a dual enrollment program with a B average in college, you could bypass this average 4.21 GPA and acceptance rate under 25%. But let me tell you one of the biggest reasons why they blew up. You ever remember me talking, Dave, about the celebrity hook?
Yes. Who's the celebrity that went to Auburn?
So her name is Sunisa Lee, known as Suni. She's an American gymnast. She is the 2020 Olympic all-around champion, uneven bars bronze medalist, member of the team that won the gold at the World Championships in 2019, the silver at the 2020 Olympics, 6-time member of the U.S. Women's National Gymnastics, and the first American ever from Hmong. Remember when I said Hmong? Or no, we both said Hmong and somebody corrected us.
That's right. The H is silent.
Yeah, the H is silent. And just to know how many is 6 world championships? Well, tied with Gabby Douglas. Let's put that in perspective.
Wow.
And then in August of 2019, just days before Lee competed in her first senior USA Gymnastics National Championship, her father fell off a ladder while helping a friend, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. The following year, her aunt and uncle both died from COVID. And she became very, very outspoken on social media about all of these things. And then in November of 2021, she was pepper sprayed in a racial incident in L.A. after a stint on Dancing with the Stars. And she was very outspoken on TikTok about it. So she's got over 1 million TikTok followers. She's from Minnesota. And she is, she's Magic Johnson for Michigan State. She's always championing Auburn all over social media all the time. Auburn's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And she just started in August as a freshman. So the celebrity hook, a lot of people are attributing. So you just never know when a school blows up. I know I went into quite a bit more detail than I normally did on that, but sometimes when you see these crazy, insane things, like Colgate last year jumped over 100%. And then when you look behind it, was a number of very unique initiatives that they put in place. So Auburn, no longer a mid-range school for the B kid.
Wow.
All right, Dave, take it away. We got a good one today.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Okay, the article today is The College Admission Double Standard by Brennan Bernard of Forbes. Brennan Bernard basically says that colleges expect high school students to identify what they want and how they are unique. But meanwhile, universities seem ill-equipped to tell what sets them apart. And now colleges need to build a wide applicant pool and be as inclusive as possible, but Bernard basically says in his article, in doing so, they often miss what makes them unique. And in trying to be everything to everyone, and in using indiscernible marketing, they end up being very generic with having very little appeal, especially to this TikTok generation. So basically, this article talks about a variety of recommendations that he and a consultant feels that they should do. They basically says that if a student is visiting a college, while he's visiting, the student should seek out a variety of voices to learn more about the particular school. The student should ask probing questions of the people he talks about and go beyond the surface facts to understand the programs and the opportunities that exist in that particular college. They also recommend that during the visit you record your impressions and your notes. And they also say that if you aren't quite sure of what you're looking for in a college, that to try a exercise of free word association about what the colleges that you've heard of visited appeal to you, and identify specific traits that you're looking for in a college. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Mark. It's a short article, but see what you felt about this.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, we've had Brendan on the podcast several times. He was on like episode 36, talking about common mistakes parents make in the process. He was back on episode 100 when he and Rick Clark co-authored a book. And Brendan and I served together at the Westtown School from 2000. Well, he started in 2000. I started in 2001. He was there until 2003. He was his second in charge in the college counseling office. And I was mostly being associate director of admissions that time. I was just doing light college counseling. But he's a great guy, and he carries a lot of roles. He's a high school counselor, so he has that perspective, director of college counseling. And he is also the college admissions program advisor at Making Caring Common project at Harvard. Does a lot of things for athletics, and he writes for pretty much everybody, Washington Post, Forbes, you name it, Huffington. So he's somebody that we frequently have on here. He's very grounded, and he's a very ethical, moral guy. And I know Brennan, and that is who he is. He's not putting on an act. So I love this article. And a lot of times I know, especially after my debate with Lisa, a lot of you guys are probably thinking that I'm just a shill for the admission office. But I completely agree with this. I really, really do. And the point is, basically what he's calling colleges out as being hypocritical. You know, it's called the college admission double standard. He could have even come even stronger and said college admissions can be a bunch of hypocrites. He really could have. Because if you know anything about admission officers, they're emphasizing over and over and over again that you need to be authentic. In fact, this is what he says in the article. He says, colleges expect high school students who have been conditioned to be humble, to identify what they want and how they are unique. Then applicants are asked to eloquently articulate what makes them special to the unique school community. And he likens it to himself as a driver. So he starts out, he says, I have a lead foot. He said, my kids and their mother will tell you when I'm behind the wheel, I push the limits of speed. But then when I'm helping my son to learn to drive, I tell him to go by the speed limit. In other words, do as I say, not as I do. And that's basically what he accuses the admissions offices of doing. And I really feel that that's fair. You know, so Brennan's oldest child is a senior, so he's just really been interesting. I know what it's like to have your kids go through the process. You see things also from a unique lens. So he's watching all the mail and everything they're getting in. And he's seen, you know, how it's oftentimes similar messaging. He recounts how a father in the Mid-Atlantic sent him a message after a multi-day trip to the Mid-Atlantic, and he says, I quote, every school pitched the same damn thing. Their message was virtually indistinguishable. And then he also has a great quote in this article. It says, admission officers decry students' bloated college applications lists, which can swell to over 20 schools, as an indication of poor research and lack of self-awareness. Yet, even as the schools try to protect and enhance their yield, the percentage of students who enroll, they try to be everything to everyone. The result is indiscernible marketing that is uninspiring and has little appeal to the TikTok generation. And then I want to read, it's a lengthier quote, but I think it's worth reading from Brian Zucker. So Brian Zucker is the president and founder of Human Capital Research Corp. It's a private education firm in Evanston, Illinois. They consult with colleges about a bunch of things like curriculum innovation, pricing policy, sustainable planning, long-term outcomes, enrollment management, and marketing development. And so the article says, talking about Zucker, he argues that colleges are trying to cast the net too wide and are therefore losing focus. He describes it as the monocropping of admission, the Monsanto of education. Large enrollment and marketing firms churn out messaging that is nearly identical in format and feel. Many of the emails that my son receives, remember his son is a senior, are clearly generated by the same company with the same college names and logos being swapped out. It reminded me, Dave. Another thing that's demonstrated disinterest when you put the wrong name in your essay because you copied and pasted. So your essay instead of saying Northwestern, you say the University of Chicago. That's demonstrated disinterest. Just thought about that. Is it good? Anyway, when students do this with their involvement, their applications and essays, we roll our eyes. Yet with huge marketing budgets, schools are wasting time and money with an inarticulate approach. Using another metaphor, Zucker says, colleges have increasingly placed themselves in the hands of the experts, who have ironically only contributed to their homogenization. Not like how Panera has seemingly come to replace thousands of truly unique independent mom-and-pop bakeries that once dotted our communities. And he adds, colleges need to do a better job of layering the information to applicants rather than just being another franchise. So, all of that is true. Obviously, there are exceptions, and I always respect people that are very clear about who they are, and they articulate that, and they're willing to stand out there alone. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, why is this happening? And the reason why this is happening is because of fear. It's fear. It's, FOMO, fear of missing out. There's the fear that if I am too unique and distinct and I don't go with the messages that have been market tested in general, not custom, but in general, I'm going to turn people off. And, one of the things that, and I hesitate to say this because I'm going to talk about this more in 215, but I guess you'll just get it again in 215. So a lot of times, Dave, when people think of colleges, they think of how competitive they are, especially more selective ones to get into. I don't think they really think how much the colleges feel how competitive it is to get the students. The colleges fear that competition, like you wouldn't believe it. They feel like there's only one of us. I've got dozens of competitors. Many of them have better facilities, more prestige, name recognition, better campuses, better sports programs, better locations, more merit money. And they really fear that they're going to lose out. And that losing out could be applications submitted, or it could be yield, getting them to matriculate. So this is all being driven by fear. Now, what I'd like to spend our remaining time on was the last part of the article, which is where Brennan said, well, what are you supposed to do? As a consumer, if you feel like you're getting, indiscernible messaging, and I'll have people I work with tell me this all the time. They'll be like, after a while, I just feel like all these information sessions are just, they just all sound the same. And so what are you to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to attempt one of my corny illustrations. I don't have Anika here to veto me. I feel emancipated and liberated. Dave lets me go with them. I don't get cut off.
That's right.
So, when Karis was 20, we're getting her a car for her 20th birthday. Not a new car, pre-owned. And one of the things that I decided I was going to do, I read all these articles and all this stuff, Consumer Reports, all this stuff on that stuff, best car, buying a used car, all that. So one of the things I decided I was going to do, Dave, was I was going to put some money and find the absolute best inspector out there. Because, all the articles say don't buy a pre-owned without having certified mechanic pull the whole thing, upside down and look at everything, right?
Right.
So I got this guy and he was not cheap. But, you know, he did like a 170-point inspection for 2 hours, just tore the car apart and looked at every single thing and then gave us detailed report. And fortunately, I'm glad I did that because he said, this car's a lemon, dude, don't buy it. So I paid several $100, but at the end, it was worth it because he was able to show me everything that was under that hood.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what this podcast is all about. That's a huge part of what we're trying to do, is to train you how you can do the 170-point inspection under the hood to see what's really there, to get beyond the marketing. It's why we did the segment on how to talk to students on campuses, apart from who the admission office gives you. It's why, quite frankly, we just had the Linda Depker interview, how she goes into social media and all the things that she learns. It's why Julia Hutchison, remember her, the student from Wisconsin who's now at Occidental, how she talked about using Snap and getting into social media groups and literally being able to learn how this school is all about fraternities and sororities. This school is about the car you drive and the clothes that you wear. This school over here is about changing the world. It's why I interviewed Carmen Chavez. You can go back and listen to all of these interviews, how she got into classrooms. How did she was able to get into the classroom? The method she used to get into the classroom so she could see what the classroom experience was like, and ultimately how it led her to pick Duke. It's why we had Vanessa Didick on here, the CEO of ZME. And why in the next 6 weeks, I guess, you'll hear from two MIT admission officers on episodes 216 and 17, talking about social media and how to use it. And some people do a really good job. So we had Christina Lopez on from Barnard, and I have had many students tell me how good Barnard's Instagram is. Like, you can literally tell the cultural difference by looking at their Instagram. So the question is, what are some other ways that you can do the 170-point inspection? I'm going to share a few. Dave, any come to mind for you?
Well, they mentioned in the article by asking probing questions, taking notes on the visits, recording your impressions, that sort of thing. But what else do you have?
Yeah, and definitely talking to people the admission office doesn't give you. I'm really big on reading school newspapers. I mentioned this probably in our first year on the podcast, and a listener wrote in and said that tip was so helpful to him. He and his son had been going through school newspapers, and they found a particular school, and there had been a rape at the school. And they were following it very, very closely. It would come up in the newspaper because, remember, newspapers are not designed as marketing. They're designed, you're already in the club, so they're talking to people who are in the clubs. They don't feel they need to convince you. And they said they visited that school because it's, a very well-known school. They held it in high regard. And they got there, and they asked them the tough questions, and they did not like the answers, and they took it off their list. And he was like, thank you so much for that tip, because the newspaper led to that. Alumni magazines, another great tool. Using LinkedIn, another great tool. Instagram, I find, can be really good. YouTube can be good. Sometimes, believe it or not, like if you go onto YouTube, some people do a really good job of like pointing out all the pros and cons of their school. And I do encourage you to not just listen to one of those because you're just getting one perspective. But listen, you listen to a tour guide when you go on a tour. This is just a student. I don't really like it when it's freshmen. I prefer if it's a junior or senior. Some of them are actually tour guides they take to YouTube. Getting those things, because you know what? Students keep it real. And I do find student blogs can be real. And MIT has an incredible one. I cannot believe, when I say incredible, I mean I cannot believe how transparent they are in that blog. I mean, they put things out there that are like, whoa. Like they're just this is who we are. So some schools do an amazing job at their blogs. More and more schools are having panels where you can go on and talk to student panels. Things like Rate My Professors are good. You can go in there, and read professor reviews. Those are all really good ways of pulling the car back, beyond the hood. And one of the ones we've talked about a while is really looking at the financial information of a school. And, I've talked before about 990s. Coming up, we're going to have someone share with you where to go on that 990 to really know if the school's in financial trouble. And we've shared some other tools before, like Hechinger Report and some others, to look at the financial hood financially. But you have to do this because otherwise it's going to be Three under a tree, three smiling, diverse faces under a tree with a beautiful campus, talking about the personal individual attention, talking about the great career outcomes, and then talking about how selective they are because prestige sells and everybody's sort of trying to make themselves to be really selective. So you'll feel like, ooh, this school accepted me. What an honor. I've got to go. Thoughts, Dave?
No, I mean, that all makes perfect sense. I mean, the bottom line is, like any other car, you have to look under the hood and do a little investigation. I think you've mentioned social media. I know YouTube is a fantastic resource, and Instagram, I imagine, is as well. So
those two I find are the best.
Yeah.
For social, like those are the two that I tell everybody to do: YouTube and Instagram. And I really like YouTube, both their official page as well as the unofficial pages. They're a treasure trove. So listen, man, I gave you all this props. I gave you all this credit, man, and you're not even coming off the graveyard shift today. You're seeming like Sleepy Floyd over there, Sleepy Joe.
No. I'm awake. And no, it just makes a lot of sense. I'm just listening.
Okay. Yeah. Try to spin it. I'm a great listener. I see where you're going with that. Because I was thinking I might have to change your nickname from Dr. Lincoln Penny to what's the name? What was Trump's name for Bush?
It was
low energy.
Low energy.
Low energy Jeb.
No. The article. Yeah. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense. A lot of this didn't come out in the article because he gave more generic recommendations, but it was good.
Yeah. No, but it's true. Pull back that curtain. Pull back that hood. Yeah. We'll continue to show you new and different and creative ways to do it. That's one of the core of our missions of this podcast. Friends, I typically record on Friday mornings with Dave and then Friday evenings with Lisa for episodes that you get 6 days later on Thursdays, late Wednesday if you're on the West Coast. And a lot of times some important news can break between that Friday and when you get the episode, and that is true this week. So I'm here just to mention a few things that went down in the last 4 days. Today's Tuesday, the 25th of January. The one that just broke is the fact that the SAT once again is going to have a massive overhaul and revamping, going to an online test, which we discussed they were in the process of doing, but some big changes. It's going to a 2-hour test, much shorter passages, use a calculator, and instead of being able to do it at home, you're going to do it either at a school or at a test center. And they're rolling this out in 2023 for international students, 2024 for domestic. So I just wanted to let you know we'll be discussing that in some more detail in episode 212. Another thing that went down, which is significant, is the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the affirmative action cases, both for Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill. And I predict that affirmative action, race-based affirmative action, will not survive this conservative court. And so we'll be discussing that and what the ramifications and implications are for that on upcoming episode. We haven't pinpointed it yet. And I think we might have mentioned this before. It didn't break this week. It broke last week. But a class action lawsuit has been filed against a number of elite schools like Yale, Georgetown, and a bunch of others, saying that they're colluding together to limit students' financial aid. And we'll be discussing that on 211. So just want you to know we're aware of these stories, partly because you guys send them to us, which we love. And we'll be addressing them in coming weeks. I don't want you to think we're out of touch. One last announcement I wanted to get onto this episode. So we formed this biannual college counselors group that meets twice a year for 75 minutes to discuss issues related to college counseling, supporting students, and helping each other. And we've got a fantastic group. Our next meeting is February 6th, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time to 9:45 Eastern Standard Time. And we've added some fantastic additions to the group. Many of you have reached out to us and then just from some networking. But we're in need of a couple additional slots. So we could use a couple more public school counselors. If you're in the public school, you're in the trenches, and you're doing college counseling and you want to be a part of our college counseling group, just shoot an email to questions@yourcollegebounkid.com. The other thing that we could use is some school-based counselors in the Midwest. So for this, it could be boarding school, could be private day, or could be public, but you're in the Midwest. Those are the slots that we need right now. We picked up a great group. We're in great shape with our IECs, our independent educational consultants, our CBOs, West Coast, East Coast, men, women, people with a lot more admissions experience, people recently in admissions, some more private-based counselors. So we picked up a great group, some more diversity, but we're just in slightly need of a few slots to round out our team. So if that's of interest to you, shoot us an email, questions@collegebellkid.com. But Brennan, keep up the great work.
Yeah.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, how's life?
Oh, it's going along, busy as ever.
Well, listeners, you should know that Lisa and I got off of our little mini debate, and we both said talking out loud really helps you process. And so we had all these ideas flying around in our mind about points we wish we made. And we thought about doing a round 3 here, but we had so many great questions that come in. We don't want to neglect listeners who are sending in great questions. So we are going to make that our bonus content for those of you who are supporters of the podcast. You'll get an audio blog this week that will be round 3. Lisa with her additional points and my additional points. So you ready?
I'm ready to go.
I'm ready
I got my
too.
additional points all written down.
You're writing them down. You're up in your game. I have 2 points I want to make never made, but they're in my head.
That, I can't remember anything unless I write it down.
No,
It's just
you're
senior
being humble.
moments.
You're being humble. Well, let's transition to our content for the day because we have a couple of great questions that came in, and I want to get them up there for our listeners.
Sure. The first question is from Will from Wisconsin, and he would like to know, how do I know what to do on a college visit?
Yeah, now this is an interesting question, and some of you regular listeners may be thinking, haven't you talked about this before? We actually have. I went back and looked. We've actually talked about college visits. This would be the 5th time. And you may say, well, why are you taking it from a 5th time? Well, we approached it differently every single time. And what I'm going to do is put the episodes in the show notes for anyone who wants to go back and look at our past conversations about college visits, because some of them were pretty comprehensive. On one occasion, we looked at 14 different types of visits, differentiating things like, your open houses versus your admitted student visits. And we went through all of that. And in a very, very detail, we went through what to do on a visit. And I want to approach this one a little different. And so first thing I want to say here is that the starting point should be, what do I need to know about this school in order to decide, one, if I want to apply, if it's going to even make my list of schools to apply to. And even if it is going to apply, you are going to apply, where is it kind of in the sort of proverbial pecking order? And I know I'm asking a lot because I say create a cluster of schools, don't fixate on one. But at the same time, you are still trying to decide what are some of your more higher priority schools, because there may not be an opportunity to go back. And if there is an opportunity to go back, you want to go back to the schools that are like your top choices. So for that reason, that's your starting point. Like, what do I need? And the reality is it's going to be very different for every single person. But what I think families sometimes don't understand is you have a lot more power as, for lack of a better word, the consumer. And you have a right to know certain things in order to make an informed decision. So, for example, for one person, it might be, I'd love to talk to a professor in an area of interest, whatever it could be. It could be, I want to be a finance major. I want to do journalism. I want to do international relations, whatever it is. So for some person, it could be a professor. For someone else, they might be extremely interested in the Career Center. It could be anything from things like internships and co-ops, or it could be fairs or how they prepare with resume writing and interview prep, or companies that come, or outcome-related data that you want to know from graduates. Or somebody else might be disability services. That could be a real concern. For you, somebody else might have food allergies, and that might be really important for you to meet with someone to see how that will be handled. Someone else, it could be learning differences. Someone else could have concerns about residential life. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Multicultural support, study abroad, or academic success center for things like writing and time management and tutoring. And so the starting point should be like, what are my needs and what factors do I need to know about for me to figure out if this school is one I even want to apply to, and if I do want to apply, is it more on my priority list? What are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, kind of you have to do the research on yourself in a way to know what you should do at these visits. And also like to really kind of make a preliminary list and really look at schools and think about them even before deciding where to visit. So, I mean, I think it's getting that self-knowledge so that you can really evaluate things while you're there.
No, I agree 100%. It's getting the self-knowledge. And then the step 2 is realizing that you don't have to just go with the standard scripted visit. Like the scripted visit is going to either be in an information session and a tour, or increasingly in this age of COVID, you're seeing these schools move their information sessions online to keep big groups from gathering together and just doing the tour. And some schools, of course, are a lot more proactive. Some schools make it easier for you because they give you choices. So, of course, I'm assuming, by the way, you go online well in advance, you sign up. And some schools, Drexel's an really good example where, you have all these choices. Would you like to meet with a professor? Or would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? But not everybody does that. But what people need to understand is that you can make that happen by requesting it and by setting it up. So that's the first thing that I want to say. Like Lisa said, go through the process, figure out what your needs are, and then say to yourself, okay, who can I meet on this campus that can help me assess this school in this area of importance for me? Could be the visual arts, could be the performing arts. That's the first thing. I'm not a fan of the 2-hour visit. That's one of the mistakes I see people make. They jam too many visits in such a short period of time over spring breaks. I'd rather people do more internet research on the front end, not just internet, communicating from a distance as well. Get that list down a little narrower and then go more for like the 3 to 4 hour visit. Not going to recount. Everybody knows, regular listeners know I'm a big believer in talking randomly to students, but we've talked about that on other podcasts. And the other thing that I really want to talk about here, Lisa, and this prompted me when I saw this question from Will, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about this. We're always talking about how it's great to communicate with your territory manager, with the regional rep, if the school's structured that way. It's good to sort of build some rapport, some chemistry, and let them know who you are. They're going to be reading your application. Well, oftentimes students say, well, like, how do I reach out to them? What do I say? And this is actually a really good question. A really good question for you to reach out to your regional rep would be to send an email, reach out to them and just simply say that, make this up. I'm an 11th grade student at Lawrence High School in Lawrence, Kansas, and I'm very interested in film and study abroad. And we're going to be visiting your school on X date or X month. And I want to get your advice on what you feel I can do to maximize the visit and make it as helpful as possible. Is there anything beyond the traditional tour and info session that you recommend I take advantage of while I'm on campus? That's a great question to ask a regional admission officer, because a lot of times they might even think of something that you might not think of. Like, for example, this is going to vary from school to school. Some schools will let you get into a classroom. Some schools allow you to have a meeting with the regional admission rep after you're done the tour. And then the list goes on and on and on. But you're kind of on the same page here. Like, you want to have a good visit as a student, and the admission officer wants you to have the absolute best possible experience. So I think it's a fantastic question to reach out and to ask and let them share with you what, their knowledge, because they might think of something that you just didn't think of. Thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just read this article and I can't remember who it's by, but he was talking about how schools don't differentiate themselves on these visits that, and I hear this from parents all the time. Everything they say is the same. We have this, we have study abroad, we have financial aid, we have a writing center, we have the career center, and that schools need to do a better job of really differentiating themselves, why the school is special. So I think Will probably is going to have to do a little bit of that work for himself, as are probably most students, to say, like, how is this particular school? What are the things that fit me? And that takes a little bit of detective work.
I know you're a psychologist over there, but now you're getting a little scary. You're like reading, You're doing the whole ESP read minds thing because Dave and I recorded our segment earlier today. We talked about this a lot. I'm like, okay, are you like tapped into our feed? Are you like tapped into our feed here?
It's just probably on everybody's mind. Well, I guess the three of our minds, right?
Yes.
So, which is pretty much everyone, right?
Sure. Sure. So that's it. I didn't want to do a deep dive on this question because we've done it so many different times in so many different ways. But what I will do for people that really want to a comprehensive answer to what do I do on a visit, what are all the kinds of things, what are do's, what are don'ts, I will once again put the links not only to the episodes, but I'll put the links to the actual timestamps in the show notes so that you could just go to like episode 95, starting at the 33-minute mark, and find it because it is actually a really important question. It's something
That's a
people
great question.
People spend a lot of time and money on this, and you really can have a visit on a 1 out of scale 10. 1 out of scale 10. Oh my goodness, 1 out of 10 scale. Let me slow down. 1 out of 10 scale. You can have a visit that's like a 3, or you can have a visit that's like a 9.5, all on your doing. I mean, sure, there can be things like bad tour guides, bad weather that are outside your control, but there's a lot that's inside your control by you sort of taking ownership. And so the bottom line is the word I want you to remember is custom. Custom. Take the visit and customize it to your needs.
Right. I think that's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, Susan, have you heard about how the Your College Bound Kid podcast has now added Plus?
No. What is Plus?
Plus is their new quarterly deep dive into a college admissions topic, a college-related topic, or a mental health topic.
Is Plus a second podcast that they're launching?
No. YCBK Plus, it's like an in-depth article, but their podcast and they go in-depth. So it's just, detailed information like 10 pages long, and it's delivered 4 times a year right to your email.
Wow. Who is writing these articles?
It's mostly Mark and Lisa, and the occasional article from Dave on being a doctor or changes in the medical field.
That sounds great. How do I get YBCK Plus?
You just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and look on the right side of the page about halfway down, and you'll see a simple sign up. It literally takes like 10 seconds to sign up.
Oh, I gotta go, like now.
That was abrupt, Susan. Is everything okay?
No, I gotta go because I'm signing up for YCBK Plus right now.
Great. Well, at least it will give us something to talk about on the phone. And by the way, they have a great place for you to put in an email address of a friend. Alice, she's always looking for stuff about college. This would be great for her.
Well, you know what they say, knowledge is power. I just wanted to add one thought, though.
Sure.
So whenever I go on tours, the students look terrified. So I think that, these are all great principles. But again, and I get this because if I were a kid on that tour, I'd be extra terrified because, I have a problem talking to people that I don't know. So I think it's a good learning opportunity for kids to push a little bit out of their comfort zone, and just to try to learn how to get out there in the world more. But I mean, I guess we make it sound easy, but emotionally it might be a little hard sometimes.
Well, it's good. You're sensitive to that and you bring that in. And I should be sensitive. People don't know this about me, but I was the shyest kid growing up.
I do not believe you.
I was so shy. I wasn't until like 4th grade I even said any word in class at all. I just sat there like a bump on a log. And when I was at Michigan State, I made myself take public speaking courses to get over the fear. And it wasn't until the 3rd one that I got comfortable. I was like petrified.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. So you just had to kind of when you put yourself out there, you just get, you get tougher skin. The hardest part is what I've asked and challenged students to do, which is to reach out to students. Most of the other stuff that I'm talking about, like career centers and professors. And by the way, we've had another great question come in about reaching out to a professor. So that will be coming up in the next few weeks. We'll be talking about how to do that on a different episode. That question came in this week. It's a great question. How do you reach out to a professor? So I didn't want to cover that now because we have a whole segment on that. But that stuff I find easier because, you literally could do that by an email. Mm-hmm. Like that can be an email from your home reaching out to, you go on the website, you get let's say career centers of your interest. Go on the website, look up career services, get the emails, and send an email directly and saying, I'm going to be visiting. I'd love to be able to sit down and talk to you a little bit more about outcomes and what support services. Like, I don't find that something that people feel they can't do. That's not, because that's usually like an email from home.
Right.
Would you agree with that, Lisa? Or?
Yeah, I think, I can only speak for my shy little self, but I'm much better at emailing people than just, and then calling them on the phone and then probably asking in person. But I was an incredibly shy kid too, and I spend my whole day talking to people all day long. So I guess, it's just, if you practice it, you'll become it.
No, but I really appreciate this. This has come up a few times, and even some of our listeners have given feedback on the idea of like talking to like random strangers on campus, and I've gotten mixed feedback from people, and even just with my personal clients, I've had mixed feedback. Like I've had people that have been like, everybody who does it finds it's amazing, but the mixed feedback is whether or not people could actually get themselves up to doing it, right? Like no. there is like, I've had to come to admit that like baby steps, and sometimes people are not quite always there. And so maybe for some people the goal is to do it to one person on a campus visit, rather than me saying like try to talk to at least 10. That could be overwhelming for people. And so I'm trying to strike that balance in terms of like meeting people where they're at. The other thing is kind of what you said too, by the way, Lisa, or kind of what you did when you went on your tour at App State.
Yeah, you tell the tour guide and you have him do it for you.
Well, no, but yeah, you do. But you can also, that's another question for the admission office too. Like I would love to have the opportunity to talk to some students when I'm there. The one thing that you lose with that is it's a lot more scripted. They're going to pick superstars. Right. And there's an aspect of randomly talking to people that's kind of nice, because it's not sort of being filtered through marketing. I mean, I ran a tour guide program with over 90 tour guides in my first year in admissions. And I mean, I was like, we're traveling all around the world to recruit. Like, I'm not going to travel all around the world to recruit. And then the whole thing goes down like a deck of cards because of a terrible tour guide. Exactly. So I screened and put people out that represented us in a way that was like authentic. I didn't want them lying, but they were personable and they were perky and they were likable and they could talk comfortably to strangers. And so that's the one downside you get when when it's a little bit more scripted, is you don't necessarily get that objective view of what an average person is like. You kind of get the superstars. All right, let's go on to question 2.
All right. This question comes from Mary Claire from Illinois. And she says, Mark, you offered an amazing session to old St. Patrick families last year. I've been listening to your podcast ever since. My question has to do with merit scholarships. Most school websites indicate that income, financial need, etc., do not play into the decision. For example, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Is this real or imaginary?
Well, first of all, thanks, Mary Claire. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. You were at that session, Lisa, that old St.
It
Patrick's.
was a great session, yeah.
Well, the part that was really cool, it was as another podcast listener that arranged it, so that was pretty cool. And you never know who ends up being introduced to your podcast from there. So that was, it's encouraging. So let's talk about this, because this sometimes feels like it can't be really true. Merit scholarships, for the most part, are really based on some talent that you're bringing to the school to elevate the school. It could, most of the time in this context, it's usually academic. And it has nothing to do with money in most instances. The way I like to explain a merit scholarship to somebody is that, and I mentioned the richest people in the world, like Elon Musk's and the Bill Gates and you name them. All the what's his name? Founder of Amazon. What's his name?
Bezos.
Yeah,
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos.
Isn't it great that we're both forgetting him? I think there's
driving me crazy over here.
It's resistance on our end, I think.
I was about to say Mackenzie Scott, because I love her, the philanthropist, his ex-wife.
Yeah, I think she was the better half there. But that's
I think so too. I hear you. We agree, but But, people like that, their kid can get a merit scholarship. They really can, because it literally has nothing at all to do with money. It literally is not. And that's what differentiates it versus need-based aid. Now, a couple things I'll say. One's going to be a little controversial. A lot of times schools like merit scholarships to go to people that don't qualify for financial aid. Why do you think that would be true, Lisa?
Marketing. It's like, schools want to maximize the amount of tuition that they bring in, right? So they have to figure out, how can I get a sort of a person who's not getting financial aid to come here and feel like it's comfortable for them? And I think there are even consultants that can pinpoint this within 5 cents
Correct.
for a given family. So they try
I don't know
to
about
give
5
merit
cents,
aid
but yes, I get your point.
Exaggerating as
I
usual.
know.
But so they're trying to get them to that number so that they'll say yes.
Yeah, so a lot of times schools approach things from, like we need 40,000, there's a net tuition revenue model out there. There's a certain amount of money you need, and if your sticker price is 60, but you really get 40, you're very happy with that, and you can't get 40 from a family that can't pay 40, but you can get it from someone that could pay 60 but doesn't want to pay 60. And the culture has really changed in the last 20 years when it's come to this. I mean, the nation has been moving slowly away from need-based toward merit-based. And so now savvy families, they oftentimes look at it like, I can pay it, but I don't want to pay it, and I don't have to pay it. And schools know that. And so it's just the reality. I mean, when I was doing boarding school admissions, I was over multicultural recruitment, and a lot of times I would be recruiting gifted and talented under-resourced kids, and they would need $50,000, to come. And so, we would throw out an offer, and if someone didn't come, and then we went over our aid budget, I would be trying to go in there and fight to see if I could go to the wait list and get another one of those kids. And a lot of times I would be told by the powers that be, Mark, love the kids, but we can take this $50,000, divide it in 10 ways up, and give $5,000 to everybody who is appealing their aid award, and we can get 10 kids instead of one. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the mindset a lot of times. The other thing with targeting well-resourced families is when you get one, that they run in circles with other well-resourced families, right? That's just the nature of the community. So you get one in, and they're all excited with the T-shirt and everything. Well, who's going to be their peer group? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how you can break into communities. Or if you're already in, that's how you can have greater penetration. So a lot of times the merit scholarships, schools would rather they go to somebody of means just because of their business model. And I know that sounds so cold and callous and so neglecting of the needs of the under-resourced.
You could just see me shaking my head, couldn't you?
Yeah, but I mean this also came up in my segment with Dave. I mean, schools are nonprofits, but they're also businesses, and they have to be able to pay their bills or they close. And so that's, unfortunately, this is back to some of that sausage making. And I almost called you Anika. I haven't slipped that way in 3 or 4 months, But back to some of that sausage making that it does occur. Now, here's what I will say. You do need to read the fine print very carefully, because there are some merit scholarships, and they'll put this in the fine print where they'll say, we do pay attention to need. Mm-hmm. You don't see that often, but you do see it. And that is indicating that, yeah, your income won't disqualify you, but if it comes down to, a well-resourced or an under-resourced kid of equal sort of qualifications, however the school's assessing it, that they will have a bent or bias toward under-resourced. So in that case, they're not doing the whole thing of they'd prefer to have affluence, and they're trying to get more tuition revenue per kid, and they're trying to break into communities and tap into your network. So it's complicated. Like all things, there's not one simple way. But the bottom line is, the majority of time when you see a merit scholarship, it is nothing to do with ability to pay whatsoever. And there's a clear-cut distinction: need-based aid, merit-based aid. That's all I got on that one. Anything else you want to add, Lisa?
No, I will save my comments on the business model for another time.
till we do round 3 coming up.
Exactly. I can't give
And
away all my ammo.
Yeah, you'll weave it in. Awesome.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
In part 1 of demystifying waitlists and explaining why they are so long, Gary Clark gives his backstory, including where he grew up, the various colleges he's worked at. He then explains the admission stats for UCLA for the class of 2025. He explains the mechanics of how the waitlist works. And in part 1, Gary explains a few reasons why you can start out with what you think is a really long waitlist and immediately can get whittled down super fast on you. And Gary also explains some of the unknowns. It's a 2-parter called Demystifying Waitlists and Explaining Why They Are So Long. Listen and enjoy. Friends, I'm here with Gary Clark from UCLA. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Gary.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so friends, it's always an interesting story in how I meet our guests. In this case, a previous guest we've had, Vince Garcia, kind of connected me with Gary about 2.5 years ago. And we've been corresponding back and forth. We met, Gary, it's been almost 2 years since I met you in Washington at the College Board Conference.
Yep. Hard to believe.
Time flies. And yeah, hard to believe. And here we are. And then talking with Gary, I said, what would be a great topic? And he had a fantastic one, which is why do schools have such long wait lists? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Well, actually, why don't you start by just giving us a little bit about your background? That would be helpful. How you got into admissions, anything you want to share?
Yeah. So the brief story, I guess, again, I'm Gary Clark. I'm the director of undergraduate admission at UCLA. I've been in my role here for about 9 years. I've been in college admission, I guess, for about 22, 23 years. I grew up in Virginia, was, first person in my family to earn a college degree. Really did a lot of things as a student, a tour guide, ambassador, all that I chose to go into admission when I graduated. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'll give this a shot. Like I really wanted to be involved in admission when I graduated because I enjoyed kind of demystifying the process and helping especially families that aren't as familiar to understand things a little bit more clearly. So started my career at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, moved to California in 99, worked in admissions at Pitzer College for about 6 years, then at USC for about 7 years before coming into my role here at UCLA. So I've kind of seen admissions from big, small, public, private, and happy to share whatever perspectives I can as part of our discussion today.
Yeah, that's quite a great breadth of experiences. Pitzer, William & Mary, USC, and UCLA. That's fantastic. You become the second member from one of the UCs to come on our podcast. We had Lisa Prescott on about 1.5 years ago. And so big shoes to fill there, Gary. She was great.
I'll do my best.
All right. So we're talking today about why schools have such long wait lists. And before we kind of dive into this, why don't you just share some overall numbers, like how many applications, how many you admit, how many you wait list, and your yield, those kinds of things, just to sort of frame our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say here, I'm focusing mostly on freshman numbers. It's worth reminding everybody that UCs and UCLA enrolls one new transfer student for every 2 new freshmen each year. So while I'll focus mostly on freshmen here, we enroll usually a transfer class of somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,300 to 3,500 students each year. So they're a big part of our identity and who we are. So this year we received a kind of earth-shattering number of applications. We received about 139,000 freshman applications, which was up from about 108,000 the previous year. And we can talk about some of the reasons that led into that. A fairly obvious one that had a big impact was the move away from standardized testing for the UC system. The admit rate tends to fluctuate in the low double digits. And with that kind of an increase and an enrollment target that's really very similar to the previous year, you wind up with this situation where, the denominator is getting bigger. The number of students applying is getting larger, but the number of students that you're admitting is either staying the same or maybe even going down slightly, depending on what those enrollment targets might be and what we anticipate our yield to be. Because if you want to enroll, I'm making up a number, if you want to enroll, 1,000 students and your yield is 50%, you only need to admit 2,000. Now, if 20,000 students apply for those 2,000 spots, there's your admit rate. So I say pretty frequently that sometimes selectivity is not a philosophy; it's just arithmetic. Like we are, we are given an enrollment target each year that we're asked to achieve. We then ultimately see how many students apply to the university, and we calculate what kind of number of admission offers we need to make to achieve those targets. So I think that's where admit rates come from. It's not, we take no pride in how selective we are. I think it's something that is difficult for us because of the quality of students that apply. But in order to hit our targets without going over, we've got to be conscious of the number of admission offers we make, and ensuring that we kind of hit that enrollment target without overshooting. And that really is what leads to kind of the waitlist approach that a number of colleges and universities take. There are ways to fix being a little bit under. There aren't ways to fix being over. If you're over, you're over. And that's not something that you can really fix. But if you come in a little under, hopefully not too far under, you're able to utilize the wait list to get up to whatever that enrollment target might be. And I say enrollment target, but it's not one thing that we're after. It's residents and non-residents. It's X number of students in the School of Engineering and Y number of students in nursing and theater, film, and television, and all these things that we have to kind of have our eye on, all of these different targets that ultimately lead up to one overall enrollment target. And we've got to have our eye on lots of different numbers as we're working our way through this process.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And listeners, if you think you heard that number correctly, you did. 139,000, the most applications in the country, and that's only freshmen. That's not even counting your transfers.
Right. We had about 28,000 or so transfer applications.
So you're talking 167,000 if you combine everything. So that's a crazy Herculean number.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
So friends, Lisa, in her YCBK Plus, that'll go live in March, she talks about Crush Your Test Anxiety and how it's an excellent book. She strongly recommends it. And so I said, would you do a recommended resource on it? Because this book sounds pretty amazing. And she said, sure. So take it away, Lisa.
Right. I can't give high enough praise to Crush Your Test Anxiety by Ben Bernstein. He is a performance coach and psychologist, and he does a wonderful job of breaking down exactly how you can learn anxiety management strategies to control your anxiety in all kinds of performance situations. He does a wonderful job of explaining how he conceptualizes how anxiety functions in test-taking situations and how to combat it. And every time I read the book, I just felt calmer. I could just feel his calm, rational, kind.
How many times have you read it? You're like, every time I read it.
Well, I just mean like I would pick up a chapter and I would read it and be like, oh, I feel better. And then some other chaos would happen. But like he just has, even just reading the book makes you feel better about yourself, and it makes you feel empowered that you can actually fix this problem, which for most of us, it feels like kind of uncontrollable. So please pick it up if you have any kinds of anxieties about tests at all. And I promise you that you'll find it super helpful.
Awesome. That's great. And I love the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
Crush,
it's a great
just
book.
the name alone makes me want to buy it. But your endorsement is what really makes me want to get it. So thank you for that. There's a lot of reasons for a long wait list. And I'm sure a lot of people don't understand this. I'm sure you get a lot of targets on your back. I'm reminded of this guy named Harry who was at Yale when I was doing boarding school admissions and college counseling. And nobody liked Harry in the area because they're like, how in the world does somebody get in this school? And it was the scarcity issue. I thought he was the nicest guy in the world. It wasn't anything about Harry. It was just, like you said, it's strictly arithmetic. And so I thought we'd kick off by me sharing a couple of the reasons I feel you'd likely have a long wait list, having you elaborate on that, and then just kind of go from there. So the first reason that comes to mind is something that you sort of alluded to is, it's not like you just have one number, right? You've got different targets and you have different yields for different groups, right? Like in-state versus out-of-state, for example. Do you feel this is one of the reasons why
the wait list is long is because you literally aren't just shooting for one number, but a bunch of different numbers, and the different numbers have different yields?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, colleges, regardless of how complex their enrollment structure might be, I mean, a small liberal arts college might not have schools the way that we do, but they still have their own, smaller targets that they might have within the overall target that they're looking to enroll in a given year. So yes, I mean, you highlighted a couple parts of that. One thing I'll say kind of out of the gate as it relates to wait list, I've shared with folks previously, it's a term that I think is a bit of a misnomer. It's not a list, and I think sometimes we think of a wait list in this kind of sequential descending order.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll often get the question from students or families or counselors about, well, where is so-and-so on the list? As if somehow like, well, if they're 50 down and you're going to take 60, they're in good shape. Like it's not, it's more of a weight pool, that is a pool of students, because the way that it functions for us, and I'll make up numbers here, but they're big numbers. So let's say we offer 10,000 students a spot on the wait list. You think, good, you're never going to take 10,000 students off the wait list. And you're right. But what happens is the first step a student has to take if they're offered a spot on the wait list is they have to opt in. They have to affirmatively say, yes, I want to be on the wait list. And right there, almost half of the students don't. They say, I'm good with the offers I got. I'm happy with whatever place I've been admitted to or places I've been admitted to. I don't need your wait list offer. And so you take potentially 10,000 and automatically that becomes 5,000 or 6,000 that are still viable and saying, yes, I'm interested in remaining on the wait list. And then students are asked and given an opportunity when they opt in to fill out kind of a text field. And it's just open text field. Tell us about whatever. We give very vague instructions. You're interested in UCLA, any updates on what you're doing, update on grades and curriculum in senior year. You've got that free text space to fill out. That's it. We don't take outside letters of interest. We don't want emails. We don't take letters from counselors or community members or alums or anything. None of that stuff has any influence on the waitlist process at all. And believe me, we get the emails, we get the calls, we get all the outreach, and there isn't anything a student can do outside of what they share in that opt-in form to impact their likelihood of getting off of the wait list. Because to the point that you made, it all depends on what our needs are following the May 1st commitment deadline, if there are any needs at all. If the commitments come in at the level that we expected, then we may not go to the wait list in a given year. So people will say, well, do you think you'll go to the wait list this year? The simple answer is we don't know. Obviously we're where we are in the process now, but if they were asking for fall 2022, we're not sure. I think generally we hope that we'll be able to do that, but we don't always know that we're going to have the ability to do that. But let's say that we do have a need, that we're a little short in electrical engineers and California residents. The only students that we would be interested in admitting off of the wait list in that scenario are students who are electrical engineers and California residents. So you take that, as in my example, like 5,000, and you distill that down to, well, there are maybe 150 students that meet that need. The other 4,850, that we don't need those students to address any enrollment need. So when colleges go to the wait list, it's to address often a specific need of some kind, especially at a place like UCLA. So that is largely what's gonna drive that. And yes, whether it's California residents or non-residents, whether it's departmental or school targets that we need to achieve, those are the things that we're looking at post May 1 to decide what our needs might be.
And because you don't know, on the front end what those needs will be, then initially you're trying to create a bit of a bench or an insurance policy in multiple departments, multiple majors, just as an example, that in of itself creates a long list. And as you've mentioned, half of them approximately aren't going to express interest.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Well, we are going to have a treat today. We are going to have Lisa, who grew up in the state of Missouri, talk to us about the flagship state for school for the state of Missouri, which is University of Missouri in Columbia. Take it away, Lisa.
Well, I wanted to start my spotlight about the University of Missouri, but just giving a little background about how I guess I and my classmates viewed the University of Missouri back in the 1980s, which admittedly was a very, very long time ago. But I'll be honest, I could have gone to the University of Missouri for free, no money whatsoever, and I refused to even consider it, which I cannot believe that my father allowed me to do. And
he didn't make you go?
He paid full freight at the University of Chicago without complaint. So, and I think at the time, it just seemed like that was a place where, the more average students from my school went. And it had a reputation as a real party school. And so it just didn't seem like a good fit for me at the time. And perhaps it wasn't. But fast forward many, many, many years to, I guess, 2019, I went to visit the University of Missouri with my daughter, Lily, because she is interested in communications and journalism. And as I'll talk about later, they have the first journalism school and arguably one of the best journalism schools in the country. Mm-hmm. So I went, and I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I was kind of blown away by the place. Then I started feeling really guilty about my dad and the money. So
the money he could have in his bank account.
Yeah. He was a very generous person. He always told me that he was just putting it on my tab, but I don't think he ever collected it. I don't know.
That's good.
I'm waiting for something, to happen later. So the University of Missouri is the flagship school of Missouri, of course, and it was established in 1839. And this school prides itself on having a lot of firsts. So they were one of the first land-grant universities, and they were the first public university west of the Mississippi. And they also started, as I mentioned, the world's first journalism school. And they invented homecoming, which that's something that they are very impressed about. And I have never been to the homecoming celebrations there, but
why am I not surprised? That might involve a football game or something.
I don't know, Mark. But anyway, but I hear that
you can always snap back on me on Seinfeld or something or Netflix.
I will. I'm going to have to work it in. Doogie and I are going to get
Doogie,
you.
Whatever his name is. Yeah.
Doogie Howser.
Yeah,
it's Doogie Howser.
Howser.
But anyway, I hear the homecoming celebration is phenomenal. They do it upright. So it's got 31,000 students. They have them from all over 50 states. They also have them from over 100 countries. And it's very pretty campus. It's 1,200 acres, and it is made out of limestone, Missouri limestone. So, but it's very pretty. It's very historic looking. It's a very walkable campus. It doesn't feel that big, and you can pretty much walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes. Now, Mizzou is also known not just for firsts, but for some what they call crazy Mizzou traditions. And one of them involves the columns. So there was an academic hall that was there, and it was the first main building on campus, and it burnt down in 1892. And as our tour guide told us, things at Mizzou burn down a lot, but they don't set things on fire anymore. So all that is left are like these columns. It looks almost like the Roman ruins. And so people do a lot of things with them. So when you enter Mizzou, you all get together and you do the tiger walk, and you walk through the columns. And then when you get out of Mizzou, you run through the columns in the tiger prawl, and they hand you beer on the other side. So I guess it's welcoming them into the world of adulthood and celebrating all of their accomplishments.
I find it funny. I like these little traditions schools have.
Yeah. No, it's a very, it feels like a very close-knit community in that way. It is located in Columbia, Missouri. Columbia, Missouri is about 2 hours from St. Louis and 2 hours from Kansas City. And it's right, if you look at it's like kind of bisects the state, both north and south and east and west. And Columbia is always ranked as one of the top college towns in the country. It has a lot of really small town comforts, but they have a tremendous number of restaurants, shops. I'm sure maybe not so much now, but before COVID, they would get a lot of great acts in, theater, bands, performances. And so it's actually, been very well ranked. There's some nice outdoor things to do there. There's hiking and kayaking, and it is a really nice place. And Lily and I always, as you know, give every college, we visit the vegan restaurant test.
Of course.
And we...
But it's important. That's important to you. You don't want to have no food options.
Exactly. And so they had a lovely vegan restaurant, which Lily always misremembers as being called the Topless Carrot, which it wasn't the Topless Carrot. I can't remember what it was, but I know it wasn't that, but it was fabulous. But I think when we looked it up, there were like 3 other ones in town. And it's just a really cute, walkable town that is a lot of fun. And it's a pretty blue little patch in kind of a red sea. And it's very liberal there and very progressive. So they have a lot of festivals in Columbia. They have a film fest. They have this big Roots and Blues barbecue. They do a lot of things in the town, too, that go along with the school. Now, what is the weather like in Columbia, Missouri, you might ask? Well, you get the worst of both worlds, right? So the summers, they're going to be hot, muggy, and wet. You might not want to hang out there in August. I'm just saying. And the winters, well, they're not cold by Chicago standards, but you will get snow and wind. So you do get all 4 seasons there. And the summer one, I would say, is the most aggressive. So let's talk a little bit about the academics. But before I do that, actually, Mark, do you have any comments or questions?
It's just an off-the-wall comment. It's just an off-the-wall. I'm like, what's with all these vegan restaurants that have these little, like, kind of risque kind of themes?
No, that's Lily's head. Oh. It wasn't really called the Topless Carrot. It was called, like, the orange carrot or the something. Okay. That's just, I don't know.
You know what the top vegan restaurant in Atlanta is called? I'm very serious.
No.
It's the Slutty Vegan. It is.
Well, I can understand. Maybe it was called the Topless Carrot. I'm going to have to look that up. Well, I guess just because you're healthy in one way doesn't mean you give up everything else, right?
Or maybe they're just good at marketing. They know how to get attention.
It gets your attention. All right. Well, so in general, when you look at the academics at Mizzou, it's a very hands-on kind of experiential type learning. Missouri is the show me state, so they've incorporated that. So I guess it's, you're going to show people how you're doing and how you're learning. And they have a lot of really strong programs. And one of them, of course, is agriculture. They have an amazing agriculture program, and they graduate, several hundred kids a year. Journalism is another huge program, which we'll talk about a little more. Business is very well respected. And then the other popular majors are computer science, education, engineering, health sciences, psychology, which, as we all know, is, I think, as we've heard, is not doing so well as a major, and parks and recreation.
I have a question. I've heard they have a good music program. Have you heard anything about?
Yes, I have. Music? I don't see, I didn't see a lot of graduates from that music program, but I know our local rep in Illinois, she has 3 masters from there, and she's an opera singer. And she's just like a powerhouse of a human being. And she just loved the music program there and extolled the virtues of it.
Cool.
So I want to talk a little bit. Let's start with the business school, since that's the one that graduates over 1,000 kids a year. And it's called the Trulasky School of Business. And they have something called the Trulasky Edge. And with that, it's a program so that they, in addition to other classes, the students are going to go to a lot of panel discussions, conferences, and presentations. And those presentations are given by executives, successful entrepreneurs, power players, and government. So they have a really big lecture and networking component. They also do a lot of skill building seminars, and they really work a lot on interview skills, resume workshops, and how to eat with good manners at dinner.
Wow.
Which I think we could all use a refresher, and I know I could.
Yeah.
And then they really make an effort to place their students into internships so that they can practice what they preach and practice what they learn. So it's a very, popular program. Lily and I visited it, and they were great. They were like 3 or 4 students. They met with us pretty much as a small group, took us all around the school. Then one of the professors sat down with Lily and said, all right, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? What don't you like to do? And I had an epiphany at that moment. I thought, this guy actually cares about the students. And I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but you have to understand that I have only gone to research institutions, right? University of Chicago, Northwestern, University of Michigan. And a lot of those professors didn't really care about teaching.
Yeah.
And so I thought, gosh, there's no ego here. I spent so much effort, I think, in graduate school and undergraduate managing the egos of the people that I was working with. So, that they wouldn't get mad at me and they would give me good grades and maybe a letter of recommendation. This guy was just giving it away to the first kid who walked in, and then I started feeling even worse about not considering it.
You got to get over that Missouri guilt 35 years ago.
Oh, well, I'm sure it was the right thing to do, but
Exactly.
I thought to myself, what? If you can't get a good education at Mizzou, that's your fault. It's not Mizzou's fault because they are providing you with all the things that you need. So that was kind of a really watershed moment. There was another young student there. He was applying from a rural area, and they were really helpful with him and trying to talk to him about what kinds of experiences he might have, where maybe he should try an internship in a big city. I mean, just very holistic thinking about this kid. I always wonder what happened to him. I'm sure he's like hugely successful already. So another program that is very popular there is the journalism program. And as I mentioned, it is the first journalism program in the country. And it has had a ton of great journalists come out of it. And they kind of specialize in 2 things, where like at Elon, there's like 5 or 6 different things in the communications department. Here you can do strategic communications, which is like advertising, marketing, public relations, or straight up journalism. But in both cases, they have a lot of opportunities. So they have the local PBS affiliate station is housed on campus. And students can work in production. They can go on air. They have a pretty large audience. So they can do those kind of things. Of course, they have amazing journalism facilities. So that means like the studios, the cameras, the editing equipment, all of those things that make all of that possible. And they're expensive, right? So you really need to go to a place that's well supplied with the most modern equipment. They also have a really wonderful newspaper program. So if you're interested in writing and print journalism, they can certainly do a lot with you there. Now, in the strategic communication side, they compete a lot with other schools. So the students will get together, they'll create campaigns, they'll go compete nationwide, and they are always in the top 1, 2, or 3 in these competitions. So it's very hands-on. They hire a lot of people who have been in the industry for a long time to come back and teach. And so it's a very dynamic place. It was very impressive.
Yeah, this is the program of all their programs where I find they draw nationally. Like, I could have a student anywhere in the country, and if they're interested in journalism, they'll talk about Missouri. Whereas as good as business is, there's always going to be most flagships have strong business, and there's always sort of locally strong business schools close to people. But I find people will come anywhere around the country, and I'm sure around the world. I haven't worked with any international students that have looked at Missouri, but I'm sure around the world. And like you said, it seems like it's everything. I mean, the written piece, strategic communication, but then TV. They've got a lot going on with TV, don't they? With what you call that, broadcast journalism?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that's probably one of their major focuses. And you could just see that the amount of opportunities that you could get there was unlimited. Like at Elon, there's the Elon News Network, right? That's a local thing. But this is a TV station that serves like 300,000 people.
Right.
I mean, that's your everyday. I mean, that's a great place to start. It's a great market to start in, to put on your resume. That's, I think, a great opportunity for someone.
I always get excited when schools have like these marquee programs that can compete with anybody. I just think it's in their best interest.
The other thing that they do pretty well is they have a lot of combined medical programs and combined law programs. So, for instance, you can do a 6-year JD bachelor's degree program.
Nice.
And to enroll to do that, it's called a law scholar. You have to have a 29 or above on the ACT or a 1330 on the SAT and be in the top 10% of your graduating class. Or if they don't rank, then they do something with a core GPA, which is basically they drop all the electives and gym, and it's just your 4 basic subjects, and that has to be at least 3.71. So I think, so somebody could walk in from high school and know that as long as they are going to get good grades at that college, that they are automatically, going to be admitted to law school. That's, I think, a pretty impressive thing.
Sure.
And they have the same kind of thing for veterinary school. So you can get a BS in the animal sciences and then go on to shave a year off of that to get a 6-year degree in the veterinary school. So I think that's a really impressive thing. They also have pre-professional programs, and the students can be guaranteed admission to graduate level programs in medicine, nursing, and other health professions as well. So it draws a lot for kids who are really interested in going into those health professions. That provides a bit of an accelerated track and sort of some lower stress, right? Because you're not so much worried about getting in to those graduate programs. In addition, they have a really nice honors college, and you can be in any major and be part of the honors college. And the honors college gives a student many advantages. One of the biggest ones is priority course registration, because as we all know, sometimes at these big flagship schools, it can be hard to get the classes or the professors that you want. And the students that I talked to in the honors college said they never had a problem with that. They always were able to get their first choices. And again, if you're in the honors college, you also have guaranteed early admission to many of the professional programs right off the bat. You can live in an honors learning community, and you can have access to different fellowships and scholarships that can give you some different research opportunities, some artistic opportunities, and you get an additional advisor. There are 2 ways to get into the school. One is you can be a direct admit, and you have to meet score and grade cutoffs, and you also have to write some essays. And they used to be like, if you get this GPA and this test score, you're in, but they have changed that in recent years, and they've gone to a holistic admissions process.
And I think you're going to see that across the board now. Just, I did a spotlight. You remember this one, Lisa, on Iowa, maybe.
Mm-hmm, right.
And, Iowa's always they're known for their grid. They've used their freshman index, where they look at intersection between grades and scores. But they just came out and just announced just this week they're test optional now in perpetuity. And so they're the 4th Big Ten school to now do that. And so that's just a trend. And I think that you're going to see more and more and more flexibility.
Absolutely. The Honors College also offers small classes with really interesting topics. And my niece takes classes there, and I will edit papers for her, and just the stuff that they're studying is really interesting. The professors seem excellent. I've seen her academic growth really skyrocket since she's been at school, particularly in her writing. So I think that it's a great program.
Friends, this completes the first half of Lisa's spotlight on her home state flagship university, the University of Missouri. We will pick up next week with the final segment.
Next week, in the news, facing an existential crisis, some colleges do something that is rare for them: adapt. An article by Jon Marcus of the Hechinger Report. Our bonus content is how various theories of decision-making can inform students making a choice of which college to attend. Our interview is part 2 of 2 by Gary Clark, the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at UCLA, on demystifying how waitlists work at a place like UCLA and why do we have to waitlist so many students. And our college spotlight is part 2 of 2, the University of Missouri. Or Missouri.
Oh, it went southern on me. That was a good one, man. I'm not low energy Jeb. I'm just such a great listener. I'm going to have to use that one. Next time when Anitra says you're so disengaged, you're just bump on a log, or you even, what's wrong with you? I'm such a great listener.
That's right. Not trying to solve any problems, just empathize.
All right. See you next week, my friend.
Take care. Take care.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Modfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.